Hey guys, George Mesa, Third Eye Edify podcast. And today I am very excited to bring a guest on that some of you actually already may know from the chats, from the Telegram page, and from chats of a number of other shows. He always has such great insight and great comments about things that are going on. As my Telegram page grew, he would start giving us input into all kinds of different things. And I started to slowly find out more about him and what he does. And I'm extremely excited to bring on Metasoundworx to the show. Welcome. This is a very exciting thing for me to have you on.
Thank
And
you, man.
yes, we know more and more information as we started talking privately came out of what you used to do. It made sense that you used to be an audiologist because you had so much insight into the technical things about sound, and you're also a pretty accomplished musician as far as I know. So you have input as far as that too, and so much more. So I'm really excited to have you on. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
And
thanks for having me.
oh, well, of course, no problem. And we were kind of joking that this is sort of your reveal to anyone that has seen you, in the chats for Interverse and other places. So it's really exciting to have you on like this. And I appreciate you making some time. Thank you. So if you want, maybe give a quick overview of where you're coming from and where you are now.
All right. First of all, thanks that I can do this. And indeed, this is my first time appearing on the YouTubes, etc. Where do I come from? I'm a guy from Belgium, Central Europe. I live in this epicenter of the globalist agenda here. If you had asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have replied with my resume, with my studies and my hobbies. So maybe I would do this, but kind of differently. Or maybe I just summed them up. I went to the treadmill 4 times. I studied sound engineering for film and television. First time, but I did not quite fit in there. I changed direction going through music production. I did conservatory. Same thing happened. I didn't quite fit in there. Third time, I reschooled myself to become software developer. Not really deep into it, but I managed to have some skills on Windows XP, programming for WinForms, etc. Third time, I didn't fit in there. I went on this search for more things sound related, and I found out about audiology. And so at the age of 30, I finally became audiologist. I've done a couple of audiology jobs here and there here in Belgium. And then in between jobs of audiology, I also worked for the government sometime in the Justice Department, even for the Belgian Intelligence Agency, even.
Wow.
A month or 6, I think that was. And then at the end of the last time in the audiology department, I had this gigantic burnout. And that was about 5 years ago now, the end of 2018. And then I went through the entire medical system. I saw psychiatrists, I saw coaches, the whole shebang. Everyone that was pretending to be able to help tried it, and it made me go through many dark nights of the soul, so to speak. And so today I'm in a self-discovery process. I started to search for the truth. I am a truth seeker by now. I'm a self-discovery person. I became this sponge for information 2 years ago. I cannot count the amount of podcasts or the amount of books that I consumed since. It has opened so many veils for me. It's like I also spent many hours in the bathtub contemplating Um, and what should I mention? Yeah, 3 years ago when the pandemic happened, I went to my deepest point. I even got suicidal at some point, but music got me through. I started to work on remix competitions.
Mm.
That's where I got my name actually, Metasoundworx. I started to work on remix competitions, and I think during all the lockdowns, I made about 70 of them, about 70 remixes of songs. Um, at first, I believed everything. So, turn back time 2 years ago, I was this complete zombified, walking in line guy that does everything according to the mainstream narrative. But today, I think about every aspect of my life has changed upside down. The usual things, the family outcasted me, the very hard to find people out here. Here in Belgium, the majority is still very much believing in the narrative. And so, yeah, my girlfriend and I, we threw out our television, we stopped watching the news, and the rest is history, just like most of your viewers, I guess.
You're right to
Yeah.
say that, actually, because to find yourself in a sort of a reawakening, or you're now a card carrying truther, whatever you want to call that, and that label can be whatever it wants. But the bottom line is you are on a quest for truth. And I think a lot of the people
Definitely.
that watch this show, I would say so for sure, man. A lot of people that watch this show, a lot of people that watch shows like this are all in the same boat. I think that before we even get to any of this stuff that I have written here, it's really worth mentioning over and over and over again that the people that ostracized you from your family or from your friends or your general surroundings, the people that all of us have lost as a result of all this, the thing that is so hard to get across that should be the easiest to understand is that I was just like you. I was just like you. I would watch Neil deGrasse Tyson and wait for his next word. I thought that, all the things that I now know are complete inversions of reality, like you said, upside down, everything's an inversion.
Yeah.
It's so easy to see now, of course, if you throw away your TV, especially, but
Yeah.
which is commendable. But it's where a lot of people, it should be the connection point between us and them, if there is an us and them. But people are choosing to stay on the other side of that line, and they're not jumping over. Unfortunately, it may take another event like that, but thankfully for you, you
Yeah.
got
As
out
long as they are
before.
comfortable.
As long as they are comfortable, because we're not trying to push anyone in any way or fear about
Mhm.
anything. But we just want to see that we're humans too. We were the same way. We just want to mention something that you might want to think about, right? But you got out before COVID. You got out of the medical system before COVID. A lot
Yeah,
of people are
that's
coming
true.
from your standpoint. A lot of the doctors you hear interviewed, they're saying, well, as soon as COVID started, suddenly I realized this and this, and I started telling people it was time to get out. But you thankfully got out for ahead of time. It was
Yeah, I actually was already in social isolation before COVID, and I
wow,
was working on that to get to know people in the surroundings here.
right,
And then COVID hit, and yeah, the
right.
shit hit the fan. Yeah.
And one thing we talked a little bit ago, maybe like a week or two ago, and am I right in remembering that you said that there's 7 different governments in
Here
Belgium? Is
in
that right?
Belgium, yeah, yeah. One for the Dutch-speaking part, one for the French-speaking part, one for the German-speaking part, one federal government governing the three linguistic areas, one Senate, and then also the European Parliament is here, and I'm forgetting one.
That's that's crazy.
It's 7, yes,
That's
but I
unreal.
don't really follow politics here
Well,
these days anymore.
but that proves that you are in Central Europe. I mean, it sounds like it. That's unreal.
Yeah,
I had no idea. Leave a comment if you did know this or if you didn't, because I
yeah.
think that's incredible information. I've never
About
heard of that.
11 million people, 7
Right.
governments.
7
Yeah.
governments. Oh, that's so. I didn't know. I didn't even know it was like that. Anywhere. All right. So let's kick this off by asking. a fairly simple yet totally open question that may even be the very beginning and the very end of this. We'll see where we go. But are we, as the human species, are we experiencing an amplitude epidemic? Movie theaters, headphones, concerts, car stereos, home theaters. Is everything way louder than it needs to be at all times?
I would say yes. Yeah, definitely. It fits into the harder, better, faster, stronger theme, I would say. Always more. Always this feeling of shortage, creating this the scared feeling of let's just turn it up a notch and then we'll be good.
Wow.
There is a lot of noise pollution, I would say. Also,
Right.
For example, here in the environment, if I go outside, I cannot go outside and be in nature without hearing anything human made. There's always cars or airplanes or something. Even in the middle of the forest, you hear human traffic or human. Yeah, so there is a lot of noise here. Yeah.
I agree with the forests, especially around. Well, now I'm in new settings. I can get a much farther away from a general highway. But growing up on Long Island, New York, there wasn't really too many options. If you were in a even deep in a forest, you're hearing cars somewhere,
Yeah.
whizzing by, and that's a very unfortunate thing. I think most people that are watching this can agree that it's hard to get away from that, strictly nature only, peace and quiet, true serenity, true silence,
Yeah.
which is something we'll probably end up talking about, actually silence and how healthy it actually may be for us, knowing that we get the opposite
Indeed.
all day. But I had a particular question, if you're able to answer it, about your job as an audiologist. Were you, or how, I guess I should really ask this way, how were you trained to help people versus, how you knew you could help people? Is there a way to kind of discuss that concept?
Yes. The key word is distrust in that answer. Yeah. I was trained to really distrust my clients. In the beginning, I was like, okay, I want to help people. I want to study audiology. I can use all my skills in the sound department and in the music department and help them out. All these poor folks and their hearing loss, I can mean something to
Right.
them. But that's not what that entire industry is about, unfortunately. It's about numbers. It's about generating numbers, and it's about that's actually more important than actually helping clients. I've helped someone here and there, but I was fairly unable to do so because of the procedures and protocols that I had to follow. I had a protocol for an intake conversation. I had a protocol for a sales conversation. I had a protocol. I couldn't even plan my own agenda.
Really?
I worked in this store where also glasses were sold, and the people that sold the glasses, they answered the phone and they made the appointments. So I would arrive in the morning not knowing who my clients would be. I could not prepare. I could not. Yeah, it was very disturbing at some point. Also, I've witnessed a lot of things that are so not okay to do. um, you can look it up, the UCL, the uncomfortable loudness level test. So
Oh,
you measure until they say, okay, it's uncomfortable.
wow.
Or
Oh, man.
when I was doing, because there's two kinds of audiologists. The ones that are clinical and the ones that are prosthetic.
Right.
I became a prosthetic one, selling hearing aids and stuff to help people hear better. The clinical ones are the ones that go into that work in hospitals,
Right.
and they go do the testing for the nose, throat, and ear specialists.
Right.
And when I had to do that, I had to test people for their balance system, because the ear is also our balance system, our inner to keep standing up.
Right.
That's what the cochlea, among other things, does.
Right.
And I had to test them, and this one test was spilling water of a certain temperature in the ear and looking at the result. And often the result would be that the entire room would start to spin for the person, even up until a point they would start to vomit. Like,
Oh man.
and I had to measure these people with this how do I call it? You place it on the head and it measures the voltage.
Like an EKG or something.
Yeah. So I didn't feel comfortable doing that, especially knowing sometimes there were patients and the evening before they had been to another department and
Right.
there was already a diagnosis.
Oh,
But yeah, the test was planned in for the morning, so I had to do it anyway so that the specialist could, So these kind of things made me reconsider being audiologist. I tried it for a while, but yeah.
wow,
And then
man.
there's also something that people don't know about hearing aids. Hearing aids are not just amplifiers behind the ear. Hearing aids are little computers. They can do a lot more than we think.
Mm.
The software in a hearing aid is designed to log everything. They are like little surveillance tools.
Wow.
And so clients came to me and they have this trial period in which they can try their hearing aids for about 4 weeks. And then they return every week and they come report to me their experience with the hearing aid, and I could adjust them and adjust the parameters of the hearing aids. And I was trained to really distrust them. So I had to believe the logs and not believe what they were saying to me. For example, the hearing aids logged the amount of time that they were worn, the amount of time that they had been watching television, been listening to radio, been in the car, been in music, been
Wow.
all these kind of sound environments are being recorded and logged and presented to me on the computer screen in really nice statistics. So I could see exactly what they had been doing with them. Just for me to have this, how to call it?
The power. You have this power over, like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
understood that. Wow.
I was trained to believe the measurements rather than the client.
Right.
So I had to, gather the data, monitor it. Yeah,
I had never heard of that. Is that
yeah.
worldwide? Do you know if it's just the way that
I would think so. Yes.
I would think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And then you can adjust parameters though based on that.
Yeah. A hearing aid is something with an enormous complex software in it, and then there is also applications on the computer, and you can adjust. You can attach the hearing aid to the computer,
Right.
to the software, and then you can program them with lots of different stuff
Wow.
for people to be able to hear. And they're really smart, actually. They work together. That's another thing that blows my mind. You have two hearing aids, and they're communicating through Bluetooth right through your head
That's actually one of the
all
one of the
day
things I
long,
mentioned.
24/7.
I was considering those wireless earbuds that everybody has now as doing the same thing. I assume that they are.
I guess so, yeah.
It doesn't sound too healthy.
I don't think it is.
Wow. Okay. So is it common to have both ears with hearing aid, or is just one? I actually don't know.
Mostly it's two. Yeah. The
Really?
sound
Okay.
always arrives at the two ears. If it's one, then there is something weird going on.
Is
Mostly
there
then there is some tumor in the brain or some nerve that has been hit or some accident that happened. Yeah.
right? Is there I assume there's fail safes for this, but is there issues with feedback and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also in the software. The
Right.
software can, at this point, the software can just take out all that is feedback.
Sure. Prevents, because that would be
It's
pretty bad.
really, yeah. Imagine being in a restaurant. Imagine having, that was part of my speech that I had to do to the client. Imagine being in a restaurant and you want to speak to the person right in front of you, and you don't want to hear the rest. And that's exactly what two hearing aids can do. They focus on the beam right in front of you. If you
I
turn
see.
your head, it would go along, and all the rest would get suppressed.
Wow.
Or if a car would pass by, the hearing aid could localize it and diminish the sound of the car and amplify only the speech. And all this kind of frequency shifting, and it's a lot of technical
I'm sure.
things to go through. Yeah.
So it is absolutely not just an amplifier at all. I
No,
can
no.
see that.
Yeah. And
Wow.
then there is the last point I should really mention. Um, I was told to do these sales pitches of different categories of hearing aids.
Yeah.
You have the cheap ones, the middle class, and the upper class, the high tech stuff.
Right.
When 5 years ago, when I was doing this, they were already connecting hearing aids to the cell phones, to the smartphones, so the clients themselves could adjust some parameters. I go to a concert, so I want concert settings. I'm in a restaurant, so I want restaurant settings.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
And these are really nice things, but why are there different categories of hearing aids? And what was the thing that hit me the most? The only difference is the software.
Right.
So imagine having 200 parameters in the high-tech stuff, and then they simply disable half of them, and you have a middle class, and then you disable another half of them, and you have a cheap class.
Yep.
That's not really helping people, is it? It's like
No.
it's like on being cheap on purpose. Like it's a business model. It's not. And so the ones that are not able to pay for very expensive hearing aids, they don't get the full package.
Wow.
And I couldn't help them as I wanted to.
Right. Right. All because of,
The
numbers.
resolution of the software was not good enough to actually help them with the problems they had.
Oh, so it wasn't even worth it, is what you're saying,
No,
right? Yeah.
no.
Oh man. And I assume we wouldn't have had access to this software. It's just for you to deal with, right?
Yeah, only the audiologist. Yeah, only the audiologist.
I guess that maybe that's for the best, right? You don't want somebody raising the gain for no reason and then suddenly they step outside and get hit by a bus sound. I can understand that.
Yeah.
It's still a level of control, though.
Yes, we were not allowed in the beginning to give the client control over the volume.
Sure.
It was a way of making them come back to the store. Like I give you this amount of volume. Now you can go try it for a week, and
Right.
after a week you come back. You are used to it, and I turn it up a little bit more, and 4 times after 4 weeks. Yeah.
It's my understanding that if you were to, let's say your job required you to drive a lot, like a truck driver or something, if you keep the volume down, let's say you blast music for half your life, right? You always listen to everything loud, like we were saying, the amplitude epidemic that we're kind of almost tricked into. If you keep the music down for a week, do you eventually find that to be you can hear everything just fine? Maybe not the first day or two, but your ear adjusts and then you can listen to it at a regular level. Is that how the ear works? Or the body, I should say?
I shouldn't know. That's a good question.
I don't know either. I've tried it. I've tried it consciously because I used to do a job that I drove for about 2 years, and I always had the radio on. And I said, I know it's loud. I'm just going to try to keep it lower for a week and see if I can. And it was fine. I was able to hear, but it's almost unsatisfying. We're trained to crave more impactful, crazy volume. It's such a crazy thing, and it's such a simple thing to avoid too, unless you work in, let's say, construction or something,
Yeah.
So, I was curious how much or little of this happens now, because you're talking about these UCL tests, these, what is it, uncomfortable loudness tests?
Level.
That's absolutely horrible, man. I had no idea. And then you got
I
people
think
vomiting.
it's just standard protocol. Yeah.
Just standard protocol. You're forcing people to vomit, and that's shameful,
Yeah.
Back in the day, like the 80s especially, I remember the old hearing tests, you put the cans on and you would raise your hand at the level that you heard.
That still happens,
That
but
still happened?
we are trained to also distrust the person, so we have to not only double but triple check.
Really? I see. I
Yeah.
see.
We
This
have to
distrust
assume
thing.
they lie to us.
you know, we're hearing it from someone who was on the inside now.
Yeah.
Because based on everything that we've seen in the past few years, especially, but before then too, you assume there's a little bit of that selling you on X-rays or, things that deal with radiation and stuff, and it's not good. But I mean, you're trained. These are protocols that you had to follow. This is what you're supposed to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are those frequencies? I always wondered. Like they're super high pitched, but they had a sweetness to their tone, almost like they were catered for the human ear. What do you know what those beeping frequencies were? But not the numbers, but were they developed a certain way? It seemed very high.
Yes, it's just a regular interval. We tested the 250 hertz, 500, 1000, 2000, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7000, I think. And
7,000.
those are the standard testing sinus, pure sinus tones.
Right. You're checking the range of your hearing, essentially.
Yeah, and then the frequencies in between are extrapolated, and then you can show them a nice diagram. Here, this is what your test result looks like.
Mm.
And here, where it goes down, that is where your hearing loss is about, and that's what we are going to amplify.
That's what we're
Then
right.
we are taught to give them everything they need. So if they have a hearing loss of 80 decibels, we blast their ears 24/7 with 80 or more decibels, which is damaging, actually.
I'm sure of it. I mean, geez, man. And speaking of damaging, I have this is like a fun side question to all of this, but cotton swabs, what we always call Q-tips out here. You're always told don't go in your ear. But I go in a little bit because I find stuff and I keep my ear hole clean, What do you know about that? Have you been
That's about the most common asked question to an audiologist.
All right, so what
Every
is
one
the
of the
real
clients
answer?
ask it. Yeah.
What is the real answer?
The real answer is do nothing, do not stick anything in your ears. Never. We are not built for putting stuff inside the ear. I never do it. The Q-tips are not good because, okay, you get stuff out, but you also push some to the back. And slowly, every time you pile up earwax, and at some point it's filled up, it's closed, and it's very deep, so you have to visit a specialist who has to get it out with a little scalpel or...
Wow.
Yeah. And then it might cause damage to your eardrum.
Sure.
If
I can
the
see that.
specialist moves a millimeter too far.
Right. Or micrometer, right?
Yeah. I wasn't allowed to do it. I wasn't allowed to clean people's ears. I had to send them over to the specialist.
Wow. So as in prosthetic versus physical, like you were saying, I forgot the other term.
Yeah, I had to send them to a clinical, to a
right.
doctor. The specialist doctor, white coat man had to do it.
Wow, man.
And also something people don't realize about the ear canal is that the inside of it is just skin.
Yeah.
It's regular skin, so it does everything our skin does.
So it's porous.
Yeah.
Right.
You sweat and you have it changes temperature. What else should I say about that?
Is that part of how water does not go in when you're swimming underwater? Is that part of the magic of that? Because I never knew how that pressure keeps the water out. Is it just pressure?
Yes, there is the eardrum
right
at the end of the ear canal.
Right.
And then there's another, I forgot the word in English. Cavity. There's another cavity behind it with the 3 little bones.
Right.
And this cavity has got a tube that goes to the throat, and the Eustachian tube.
Right.
And there is muscles closing and opening this tube to regulate the pressure on the inside of the eardrum. So when you go underwater, that's what happens. You inhale, and there is pressure building up so that the eardrum is like on a how do you say it? Opgespannen. It's stretched out, so it cannot
Right.
really move like on a drum.
Right.
Yeah.
So the drum tightens. That's
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
because you're inhaling first, right? That I didn't think of. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm glad I asked that question. That wasn't part of the thing. That's very interesting, man. That's very interesting. So I guess you may have actually answered this already, but is the medical industry making it very hard for people to actually remedy their hearing problems by the protocols that you discussed? I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Obviously, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. But lately, I'm wondering if such a thing even exists.
Mm,
Hearing problems.
right. Right.
If it's like we don't hear the noise level of our own bloodstream.
Right.
Somehow our brain knows to ignore it. It's there, but we don't listen to it. And I'm thinking lately, I'm not sure of it. I should investigate some more, but I'm thinking lately that if you are exposed to a lot of loud frequencies, our brain does the same thing just to protect us. Like if you go to a pub and there is loud music, your body starts to protect you.
Mm.
It starts to give you signs to get out. Sometimes you get a ringing in the ears, or you get this whistling tone, or you can sometimes really feel the
Or
pressure on your
pain.
ear.
Yeah. Yeah. You get pain sometimes.
Yeah. So that's, to me, it's now. If you had asked me 2 years ago, it would have been an entirely different answer. But
Right.
I think it's the body giving us a sign to the overexposure, to the hyperexposure that is happening.
The amplitude epidemic, right? It's
Yeah.
just everywhere. I mean, there's no place where it isn't too loud, I think. And the way they make the car and home stereos, they're really loud, and phones can get pretty loud. And some people have earbuds in their ear morning until night, just covering their ear hole. Is that how
asking for an
unhealthy?
infection?
It's pretty unhealthy
Because
because
the
it's
sweat
skin.
cannot get out. You cannot regulate the temperature or the humidity levels inside the ear. So
Right. They're all meant to be done on their own, normally and naturally. Right.
Yeah.
That's I didn't think of that, actually. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
And what is it when our ears are ringing? What are we hearing exactly? Where is that tone generated from? I never quite understood that.
the way I would describe it, but that's also very medically infused in me. I don't know if it's true. So there is this transmutation happening. First, the eardrum moves
Right.
against the three little bones. The three little bones press on another window, we
Right.
call it, with another membrane, and that's moving the fluids inside the cochlea, inside the snail house thing.
Right.
Yeah.
The
And
balance.
inside this snail house, there is a membrane that is shaped like the snail
Right.
house.
Right.
And on this membrane, there are tiny, tiny little hairs that move. And when they move, they release chemicals.
Wow.
So it's these chemicals that cause electric impulses. And that's how sound is transmuted to the brain. And so what I think is that some of these hair cells are being blasted away, are constantly giving off chemicals, and so you hear a constant sound in your brain.
Wow.
Like,
That sounds accurate.
yeah.
That does explain it in a certain way. Are we talking about the organ of Corti?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The membrane of Corti. Yeah.
The membrane of right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So knowing that organ takes in different frequencies depending on how far you are in it, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
I have
first the high frequencies, and then on the top,
and then it gets
low.
to the.
Yeah.
I remember because I did an episode on it, but that was the first time I ever really studied it. So I want to make sure that does the ear's shape, I have another question that I want to relate to that, but let me ask this one first. Does the shape of our ear, which is so particular,
Mhm.
does it catch sound a certain way on purpose? Why is it shaped like this? I always wondered, because all the action seems to take place inside. I always wondered about why the shape is what it is.
First thing, it's to protect the eardrum,
Really?
obviously.
Right.
But I would think the particular shape is because we want to understand speech.
Mm.
I think the ear shape resonates those frequencies that speech consists of. Yeah. And then
Wow.
there's also uh, the localization of sound.
Right.
Um, it's only the front to back localization. So if a sound comes in from the back or from the front, we hear the difference. And so we can localize it.
Right.
Um, we are built a little bit different than animals, I guess. If you watch horses, their ears turn.
Oh yeah.
We turn our entire head, so
Mm.
we don't need the shape of the horse ear.
Right.
We can turn our head a lot more than a horse can.
Right.
For example, what else? The ear shape. Actually, the hearing organ is one of the first things that grows when we are embryonic.
Mm.
When we are still very, very small.
Right.
We are our hearing organ.
Wow. I didn't know that
So
actually.
that's the shape of the snail thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the first things to grow. Yeah.
Wow. The
So
organ of
already
forte specifically?
yeah. So when we are in the womb, we can hear already from the early beginning. Yeah.
That makes the mother's connection even more important. Skin to skin right after birth, which
Yep.
they're doing their best to avoid in the hospitals, obviously, and it's disturbing, to say the very least. Very good information, man. You know, these answers are very thrilling for me because I've had these questions my whole life. You know, so this is
Okay.
great, and you can look it up, sure, but it's not the same. You know, you have the knowledge through experience and through actually your career that you had at one point. So that's very interesting, man. You know,
Yeah, it was one thing that drove me to study it, actually. I
yeah,
have been having this absolute hearing going on since I was a little boy.
right.
6 year old. I could recognize tones. I had
And
and
overtones, I assume.
no, not so much. I was taught the names of the notes,
Right,
so that's what I hear when I
right,
hear a song, and I have problems hearing the lyrics.
yeah,
I hear do re mi fa sol.
right, right.
I don't.
Solfege, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a very useful thing to approach as a musician. Be like, oh, mi re do, okay. In this key, it's D sharp, C sharp, B, whatever. But it's interesting how you say that because me too. You know, lyrics wise, as a bass player, I'm always harping on the melody to make sure my bass line is interacting well with it, but not as often as the lyrics. Not as often. I usually have to go back and that's what he was saying there. You know, so that's interesting. That's very interesting, man. I love that actually. Um, and you know, now as I mentioned, tones and overtones, because you can hear overtones if you know how to focus. It's like anything else, you know.
Mhm.
But people don't seem to acknowledge very much, and I guess I've mentioned this in the past on the show, that there's an entire frequency spectrum of sound. It's not just the 12 notes of Western theory, you know, perfectly separated into 440 hertz. People acknowledge 100% that there's a full spectrum of color, right? Our visual spectrum. They recognize that there's not just red, but there's all these different reds, endless red, right? Thousands of reds, thousands of yellows or more. And no one, when we say, here's how A sounds in music, people are like, oh, great, there's A. There is so many things going on between A and A sharp. Why doesn't anyone seem to acknowledge that? I think we've been trained this way. I really do. To just like, don't worry about it. That's just nothing to see here. It seems that
Mhm.
way. But you, as an audiologist, have dealt with all frequencies, I'm sure, the full frequency spectrum to rehabilitate with, well, if you want to call it that, with earplugs and ear pieces and stuff, right? Is that
Well,
accurate?
yes and no. I only measured the frequencies I mentioned.
Oh, I
So
see. And the in-betweens came from, oh, okay.
yeah,
Wow.
the
I
in
never,
betweens came from the software. Yeah.
I see. So, it seems that we just conveniently sidestep. We were talking about the trivium and quadrivium before we loaded up here. It seems that any teachings we have nothing to do with frequency or how that affects nature or how our bodies and everything around us works regarding frequency. They train
Yeah,
us to just learn
it's
nothing about it.
something that is going on very big in the New Age movement.
For sure.
Everything is vibration. It's like
Right. Right.
it was also a new concept for me 2 years ago when I woke up to all this, reading hermetic texts,
Right.
reading everything is vibration. Okay, I have spent many hours thinking about that,
Right.
and to me it feels like this tunnel vision thing. Always centrally imposed one way think, narrative think. It fits science. It fits the religion of science.
Sure.
And I also think it's something they like to keep secret, because if we would know about frequencies, then they would also reveal everything concerning white or black word magic. Like, if we would know the impact of the words we say, actually have deep knowledge of what our voice can do. During the pandemic, for example, I watched these politicians and they were so proud of the new words that they invented here in Belgium.
Oh man, I'm
They
sure.
were so proud. And these new words, yeah, I'm thinking, can I name an example? I myself I speak Dutch, and in the Dutch language, it's very easy to combine two words together. And they were doing this constantly,
Oh, that must make a lot of
making
confusion.
new words up that are not in the dictionaries, just to throw out and have people act on it.
Sure.
And everybody gives their own version of what the meaning of that word should be. And so you saw all these crazy things happening suddenly. And they all did this by speaking a handful of new words. Yeah.
I see. That makes perfect sense, man. I know Germany is known for that too, combining words,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4 words in one, right?
Yeah.
So it's a Central Europe thing, perhaps?
Maybe, or just a strategic thing they use to manipulate folks. Yeah.
That's a good point. Because,
Yeah.
when I was in music college and singing, we certainly sang our fair share of German, obviously. And it wasn't as common, but there were times. There were times when it was a double word, and but when you're singing it, it's not the same, obviously. People always picture, for example, German as this very guttural, it sounds like when Hitler talks. But when you sing it, it's pretty beautiful, actually. I really thought it was a wonderful language. I really do. And it's funny how the perception gets lost when you're singing. Like, did I just say two words at once? You don't know, especially if you don't know the language and you're just singing it. I can read German great. I don't know what I'm saying. I can phonetically read it.
Yeah.
There's really, this point may make sense now in the flow of the conversation. There's just more of everything. Like you said, bigger, better, faster, right? I actually remember this band, Three Non Blondes, was really popular in the 90s, and they had an album called Bigger, Better, Faster, More. And it was about, take a birth control pill and, live your life like a crazy person. And it was really, they were popular for just a quick little moment. But right after that is when things seemed to just escalate into craziness, leading right up to the early 2000s. And it's that things like that can actually set off the public mindset. But there's so much of everything. And the way to label that in this conversation is that the frequency of everything is higher. There's more of everything. And when frequency rises and rises and rises, eventually you can't hear it anymore. And I'm just wondering if that's one of the ways that we're blinded to everything. Increase the frequency of everything,
Yes, and also at the low end. I mean, all these professional equipment, they have a cutoff at 20 hertz.
Right.
Why? I've been wondering why can't we produce 1 to 20 hertz?
Right.
What's up with that? Like they do it at festivals.
Sure.
The festivals, the volume got so loud lately. Also here in Belgium, the Tomorrowland. You ever heard of it?
I have.
Tomorrowland.
I'm not too familiar with it, but I've definitely heard of it.
It's a couple of cities far away, but I could hear it at night.
Wow.
Here I could even
A couple
almost
of
hear the
cities away?
yeah, yeah,
You heard it? Oh my God.
yeah. So there has to be some kind of low end to it for the noise
Sure.
to travel so far.
Right.
So it's like they have monopoly on the low
On the low
band
stuff?
and also on the high stuff. I mean, certain radio frequencies we cannot access. They're for the military. They're for the
Right.
yeah
Very good point.
police radios.
Very
So
good.
there is some monopoly going on the frequency scale.
It seems like it. It seems like it. I mean, that kind of answers my next question. Is there a frequency war on the entire human population? I think there is in so many different ways, you know? It seems like you're proving it with the answer to every one of these questions, too, right down to the, you know, you'd be the person people go to trust about the hearing aid. And then you can't even give your honest opinion. That proves it right there. You know,
Yeah.
you were conscripted to say certain things. You were conscripted to a script, you know, and you had to say it.
Yeah.
And it's
exactly.
a frequency can easily be a weapon. And like you said, words can really affect you to the point where you vomit, just like you're some of your patients used to, right? You can really hurt somebody with your words, even if you just met them. The way you say something or the way the word is pronounced, you know, the tone that you use or your body language, you know, matching the words, all this can really go a very long way. And I think that one of the smartest things about the way propaganda is made, like propaganda videos, let's say, like those old wartime videos, is it's the way that they talk, it's the music that they put in it, it's the exact images that they show, it's the way the camera pans to make you feel like you're there. So much goes into it, but frequency can actually be the deadliest and the most effective of all of this. And maybe they're hiding the highs and the lows. Maybe they're hiding it in all the digital music that we have. Who knows?
They used to hide things in video, like little Starbucks cups flashing,
Right, right.
or these kind of things. Why not in sound? Yeah, why not? One thing I know is that they have been experimenting in supermarkets,
Right,
with aiming sound like a laser, and then having people tracking people where they are in the supermarket and aiming a personalized beam of sound at them that whispers words like buy this, buy that.
right.
Shouldn't you eat ice cream right now? Don't you crave some ice cream? You know? So I know they have been experimenting with that. There are some MIT papers on that, but if they are actually using it, I don't know. It seems like very hard to pull off.
It would
And
have to
that's
be
many of those things. They have all these nefarious plans, but most don't work. Most don't
right.
work out. Like everything can be weaponized, but literally everything. But are they succeeding in it? I don't know.
Well, whether or
We
not
woke
they're
up.
like,
So
yeah, well, that's a very good point. You know, if we're about to win the chess game, if everyone can see that the chess game's about to end, they're certainly prolonging that final move as much as they possibly can, knowing that they're going to lose. And we can only hope, of course, that that is truly what's happening because it feels like it. You know, the general feeling is that.
yeah, to me, it feels all this data gathering, all this controlling people is just the scared elites that are afraid to be exposed, that they had never any power to begin with.
Sure, sure. And maybe this
Yeah.
information set that they have now, the Internet of Things, is they're like, well, we have this. And everyone's going to say, well, so what?
Yeah.
We have each other. and you got nothing, you know. Let's hope. We can only hope.
One thing that proves that to me is that they are on this endless loop of data gathering. So the only thing they do is being in the first stage of the trivium, the grammar stage.
Right.
You ask the questions who, where, when, and what. That's the first step of the trivium. But then you have to answer the why with logic. You have to feel, you have to spot the contradictions in it. And that's not part of what they present to us. And it should be, because if you are going to the rhetoric phase, if you're going to answer the how question, then you also need to know why things happened. Non-contradictory, or you're not speaking the truth.
Or it's not truth. That's
so
right.
if you read newspaper articles or things that are presented to you just by the data of it, then there is no truth to it because it's not complete information.
Right.
So that's the thing that proves to me that all this data gathering will be unsuccessful in the end. They should add the why. They should add the logic and the middle part of the trivium.
Right. The second, they didn't even get to the second step. They're nowhere near the rhetoric. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
very good point. You know, and the AI revolution that is many decades old, that some people think just started last year. That's how they're claiming to get to these whys. You know, taking the information and turning it into something. I don't see it happening. It's running off binary code. It doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have anything else.
It's just raw data.
It's just raw data.
The first step, and that's it.
It really is.
It's
That's it.
incomplete
Wow.
truth, so to speak.
Well, this is one of the most important things we've talked about. This might be the most important thing that we've said all day. It's very nice, actually. It's almost reassuring, you know, because yeah, that's there. We know they're doing it. Otherwise, people wouldn't get the advertisements on their phone that have to do with everything they talked about yesterday. You know, they're clearly doing it, but that's all they're doing. Yeah, it really is a fear. It's out of fear. It's out of worry. And it seems like a last resort of sorts.
Yeah, it's like what I mentioned, that I had to distrust folks. I didn't know why. Why should I distrust them?
Right.
So the why was not there.
It works every time, doesn't it? The trivium.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And it's still, as we said before we jumped on, it's incredible how little people still know about it. But it's just like the frequency spectrum. People aren't even aware of frequency and what nature is. And people don't even know what the trivium is. And if you were classically trained, not musically, but education-wise, you knew all of this. People that were not musicians knew more about how music works than most people that are, play music. And that's a big part of why it's a struggle for me as a music teacher. The kids, certain parents want to see a certain thing in a path of the teaching. And then suddenly they can read, okay, if they practice enough, but they have no idea what's going on or what they're doing. And they can play all the chords they want, but they don't even know how the chord functions or how it spells or what it's supposed to do. They can just do it. It is much like this trivium problem. They don't even know the why or the how.
Yeah.
And that's why I do my best to avoid it when I'm teaching.
Yeah, that's very much like the point you usually say, that there's no ending to things.
Yeah.
The end is missing. Things are not completed. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Or they jump to the end before getting any other information, and it's the most unsatisfying thing, and it feels good to them. But that's the nature of social media and stuff that may have pushed that. But I think that's a conversation for another day, perhaps, because
that's a very deep rabbit hole.
Right. That's a whole nother thing. So, were you using Napster when it came out back in the day? Late 90s, early 2000s. Are you aware of what it was?
I was aware, and I used the second version, the LimeWire thing.
LimeWire, yes.
Yeah, the other ones. Yeah,
I remember. Yeah, LimeWire.
Torrenting and open source ideas. Yeah.
Which are still pretty valid. Torrents still happen. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But it's just all of a sudden everything was streaming, and they took away our access to, or at least our perceived access to, physical copies of things. And people started very quickly just getting one song and not even knowing that there was an album, or not even knowing who the artist was. It would just have a song. I love this song. Who sings it? I don't know. I actually heard that the other day from a student. I want to play this. I'm like, oh, okay. And it was, unfortunately, it was pretty lame. And I said, okay, well, what is this? It's like, I don't know. They didn't even know what it was. They didn't even know the name of the song. They kind of like had an idea what they knew a lyric. So I was able to find it from the lyrics. They knew like one lyric, one phrase. They didn't even know that, had no idea. It was a cover. They didn't know any of that information, you know? And that I'm finding that very much lately. It's unfortunate. But I mean, that feels like it was part of the plan. As far as, you will own nothing and be happy. Music kind of helped this move along, I'd say. And eventually streaming with videos and stuff too. Don't bother buying DVDs. But people stopped buying CDs very quickly, I think. And the price of them jumped up. They used to be about $15 by me.
Taking away the material aspect of it.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And the fidelity overall, definitely. There's no denying that. I mean, obviously.
Listening to MP3s. I don't know. Do you hear the artifacts? I do.
Yeah. Oh man, it's ugly, man. It's ugly, And it's funny, but like they're preventing how we control hearing our own music. When you go to use like Apple Music or something, where's the EQ level control? Where is it? You got to dig deep to find it, and it's not very extensive. They give you get what you get, and it must be even easier to hide things now, as far as the frequencies you mentioned or anything else. I mean, what could be hiding in these digital copies, man? It's scary to think about. There must be a lot, because subconsciously it can't just be a rap song that drives people to do things, or some pop song. There's got to be hidden stuff in there, just like you were saying, when they focus that beam and get you to buy, whatever they want you to tell you.
Maybe. Yeah, it could be. I've never heard it. I've never actually seen that in the metadata there is something that they're streaming to our ear that is whispering something we should do. I don't know.
It could be anything. It could just be a certain overtone controlling, or two frequencies that shouldn't be together that they know about, that's just there and you don't know it's there. It could be doing anything. Who knows? And if your headphones are on all day, that's all you're getting. I mean,
if you mention dissonance, then our body would crave for resolution.
Right.
So if you present people with dissonance, for example, in a store, then they might be more obliged or feel obliged to buy stuff to satisfy themselves. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
A new theory to me.
No, but that's I think dissonance governs most of our lives in general, because without dissonance, musically speaking, there's nowhere to go. You're stuck on the tonic. You're stuck on the ionic pillar. There's nowhere else to travel. You travel in music. You come back home eventually, just like you tell a story. You get to the climax, you make your way back, and most stories end where they started. It's just kind of the way it goes. There's a resolution. You leave your comfort zone, you come back. And dissonance guides us in our lives. And this could be no different. This dissonance, unresolved dissonance, or what could be called unprepared dissonance, musically, it could very easily keep people in a state of stress, at the very least. And it might make junk food more appealing, for example. I still see huge lines outside of fast food.
Yeah, huge. The FOMO, the fear of missing out thing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It is. It's actually a fear, as opposed to it being just a luxury. I'm missing out on this thing. I can't do it tonight. No big deal. Now it's like a fear. Like, I don't want to be left behind. That the next time I talk to my friends about the stuff I didn't see, or whatever. Oh, it's crazy, man. So,
I'm thinking of these real crazy things that happen out here. I often see here down in the road people wearing these earbuds.
Right.
They are standing on an electric step.
Right.
So, and these electric steps, that's something new from the 15-minute city idea.
Oh, I see.
So you have a step and it goes as fast as a small motorcycle. It's electric, so you can really give some power to it. And they're standing on it, going at bike speed.
Right.
Looking at their phone. Not even looking, and then scrolling through all this. You dubbed it short form entertainment.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's so weird for me. I would never do such a thing. Like, go stand totally unprotected, no helmet, nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, no helmet. Good point.
On their slippers even sometimes. Just covering their ears, not giving attention to the traffic or whatsoever, to the cars, just racing through it like crazy. Yeah.
Wow, man. That is the
And then
goal of the 15 minute city.
in,
You're
in
right.
the in the fear of missing out on the things that are happening on their smartphone.
Yep.
It's very weird to see so. And then they're also consuming a lot of energy because they have to charge these electric steps. They are and they are programming themselves
Sure.
mindlessly. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, that goes back to the high frequency of things. There's everything is such high frequency that, even in 10 minutes, there's millions of posts of new things, people catching something that no one else did. Citizen journalism left and right, right? Sometimes not by citizens, but it's really overwhelming, I guess, in the end. But most importantly is it's preserved unless it's something that goes against the narrative and gets shut down, and you got to use the Wayback Machine to find it. If you missed it, you can go check it out in 10 minutes. Just wait till you go to the bathroom or something, it'll be waiting for you usually. I guess the cell phones really promoted that. When the phone rings or the beep, I was going to say beepers. When the phone rings or when the text comes in, everyone's just constantly, even people that don't have their phone on them all the time in the front of their face, they still they're always just, even if it's just to check the time, they just feel like they have to.
To me, that's a true pandemic, the smartphone pandemic.
That's the biggest one, I think. You're right. It's easily the one that's affected us the most. Without a question. Yeah. Oh man. It hurts. It hurts to even think about it. And speaking of pain, what was up with those bass boost buttons from all these? Did you have those back in the 90s, 2000s? Every stereo had a bass boost on it. And it didn't
it makes me think of this story where a sidestep
yeah,
where the women were given pancake mix. Have you ever heard the story of the Betty's pancake mix?
no.
So they were given pancake mix and they felt really bad about not doing anything because the only thing they had to do was add some water.
Right.
And you had good cakes. You could they so when the husband came home, they didn't really have to put some work in, and so they stopped buying it because they felt guilty. What did they do? They took out the eggs and they made this little recipe on the back of the box saying, okay, now you need to not only add water but also an egg. And that was enough for them to feel like, okay, we have at least done something. And that made them already also buy the cake mix. And it's a similar thing now with the bass boost button, I think, or with the treble knob.
Right.
You have this tiny amount of control,
Right.
which is not a lot. It's just some frequencies that are boosted or diminished. But you get the feeling of being able to adjust it to your liking. And so you are tricked into feeling that you are putting effort into something, but actually it's like a tiny drop on a hot plate.
Good point. It really isn't much at all. And, for considering what it's called, yeah, there was a boost in bass, but it wasn't a desirable one at all. And it would just make everything very muddy and hard to hear.
Something other I could tell about bass is the reason why male voices sound more I wouldn't say better, but more relaxed or more easy to listen to than female voices is because of the bass. If you think about the overtones, the fundamental frequency of a male voice is much lower, and so the overtones they double and they triple,
right?
And they are spaced very wide apart on this cochlear membrane,
right?
Organ. A female voice has a higher pitch, and the doubling of these sounds are spaced much closer to each other and is therefore much much more complicated to listen to.
Wow.
There is much more work to do to listen to high frequencies than to listen to low frequencies. Also, our vowels are low frequencies,
Right.
and the one thing that makes us understand speech are the high pitched tones, and those are the high consonants, especially the transient ones, the very short ones. So if you want to get people to stop communicating, you give them a lot of low sounds, especially in a very predictable way, in a very predictable manner, like German techno or anything that is just a four beat with
Right.
much low end to it. And so you are actually programming to be lazy and to not do the effort to understand speech, or to not do the effort to distinguish sounds on the high end. So
Wow.
that also plays a part in there, I think.
That is sound advice, as this show is going to be called. Wow, man. It actually might be more stressful on the body, and you know, overall, in a good way, of course. Good stress, good productive stress to generate, to take in and generate a response to these higher frequencies. Yeah, that's incredible. I also found them more piercing when I was in a room with a flute player once, very tiny practice room, and you know, we were playing, just messing around, and that flute really hurt my ears, you know. And bass should hurt more. The orchestral bass drum, that humongous thing, that can mess with your ears if you're close. You better be careful. But
Yeah,
the flute can really rock you, man. It can knock you out. As you know, it can make you vomit. You know, it's high frequencies can hurt.
There is this rule. I forgot it. I think it was 85 decibels for, was it 8 hours straight? And then you get hearing loss already.
Really?
And then every 3 decibels that you go up, the time diminishes by half. So if you
half,
go to,
holy crap.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 3 decibels higher is half the exposure time to get hearing damage.
Wow.
And the funny thing is, here in Belgium, regulations are for workers who work in the industry. If they're exposed to loud sounds, the employer has to provide hearing protection if it's 85 decibels or higher.
Wow. That's great.
But in China,
Right.
it's 75.
Wow.
So who's right?
Better safe than sorry, I guess, right? I mean, 75 is the winner here, I'd say.
So here, people are allowed to have a certain degree of hearing loss if they work in an industrial environments, and
wow,
it's part of the sales pitch. It's part of the business model, I think.
Wow, I didn't know that either. That's crazy, man. You know, I should throw this in too, if you know anything about it. There's the whole new lossless audio and Dolby Atmos. Does that play into this conversation at all? I mean, is it even usable? Is it a marketing ploy? Is it something worse? What is it? I can't seem to really get a big difference for me personally.
One thing I experienced was visiting, concerning Dolby, etc. I was visiting a gigantic music studio here in Belgium.
Yeah.
One of the largest ones.
Cool.
It was this very nice structure. The entire building was standing on springs.
Wow.
So you could have an entire orchestra in there.
Right.
And then there was the window, and the thing they showed was there could be a truck passing by, you wouldn't hear it.
Ah.
So it was completely isolated from any vibration because the entire building was standing on springs. But the thing there was, most of the time, this building was standing empty.
Right.
It was way too expensive to. There were famous Hollywood stars that rented the place.
Right.
And very, very large bands could afford this studio. So the owner was quite bored. He had this €1 million project, and finally it was there, and he was very proud of it, but it was standing empty for most of the time. So what was his idea? He was going to develop the new sound standard, and he was developing the 10.1 surround
Right.
thing. He was doing the Dolby thing with the 5.1, but he was doubling it up.
Wow.
Once 5 speakers in the ceiling and
Right.
once 5 speakers on the floor to add an extra dimension to sound, to add height in sound. Imagine movie theaters
Right.
adding 10.1 sound, and he actually was doing this, but I think it was I couldn't help but notice that it was a thing just to inflate his ego or something,
Maybe. Right.
just to get out of his boredom,
Like, I got to do something.
to feel this power, to feel this I want to be the one that standardizes everything. Or
Right.
so there was nothing more than that behind it.
Wow.
The studio was empty. He was he was bored, so he experimented with these kinds of things.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, but even with the Atmos and all this other stuff, like, yeah, maybe he was bored, maybe it was something cool, maybe not, but who's noticing? Most people don't get to notice or appreciate any of this stuff. And there's big budgets for some of these things to happen. So when suddenly everything's lossless and Dolby Atmos everywhere, and I keep seeing people like you and other experts saying that it doesn't even do anything, what exactly is going on? I mean, it's only going to happen with digital music. It's not like a CD thing, I assume. So
No, it can be. You need 6 speakers.
it doesn't, right? So no matter what,
and a fairly large one for the bass. So
yeah, right. So most people aren't even getting it anyway. It's almost useless. A lot of the smart TVs at first, a lot of the newer LCDs and whatever happened before that 15, 20 years ago, they had 1080p, but most things didn't support 1080p. So it didn't matter. And it was the same thing. Yeah, I have a 1080p TV. That's great. What do you watch with it? Oh, regular old television. It doesn't, you don't get it. So no matter what, even video games.
Same thing with the 3D television.
Exactly. How often
about
are you?
10 years ago, and there were like maybe 100 3D movies in total, and then
it's a very small number. It's a very small number. Man, so maybe
might just be some bored guy that wants to again make some money of new ideas, and then
it seems like it, but and Dolby's one of those names you don't realize that really well. They're on the beginning of all these movies that you've seen over the years. They're everywhere. They seem to be like the only one in their class, and then they do this. Companies like this don't usually flop. Windows doesn't usually flop. It's just not something that these companies do. They make something that everyone gets to ingest. So it's just, and more on this with the progression of where this show and many other shows go. I'm sure there's more to discover here because it's pretty new, but we'll see. It's just popping up everywhere all of a sudden, and it's just one of those things. Just one of those things to keep your ear on the ground for.
The anecdote I told you about of the 10.1 surround thing was back in 2004.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was when I was in the sound engineering college, and we visited the studio.
Yeah. Wow. Because I know that some people were trying to do like a 3D, 4D sound thing, the way they set their speakers up on the stage and stuff. But I don't really think it came to fruition for the whole crowd. I mean, you got to have it in the crowd. Everyone, do you think that you have to experience it one person at a time? Does a crowd really get to experience it?
Yeah, it's just like in the movie theater. There's only one seat that is the exact equivalent of the sound engineer seat.
The X and the Y meet up. Right.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
So there is only one person in the entire cinema that is getting the sound that the sound engineer mixed and that were on the ears of the sound engineer.
Oh. Yeah. Do classical amphitheaters do a better job?
Maybe. I wouldn't know.
I
haven't been in too many.
I have, and very often the first thing I do if I'm there early, or in college we had an outdoor and an indoor one. So I would go there and we would find there's this one spot that you could clap, and we'd go right in this one spot. So that was that spot. Anywhere else you stand, it doesn't work. So yeah, that's perfect. Whenever you see the diagrams of how to set up your speakers, there's a guy sitting in a chair, and there's these speakers, and there's these little cones of sound coming at him, and he's in that one spot. And that's where you should, put your microphone when you're recording and stuff like that. So wow, I didn't even think of it actually, but one person gets it.
Yeah, let's tie this to the sound of silence. Let's say the phase difference between the speakers. So
Right.
if you're not in the sweet spot, certain sounds are canceling out because there's the same sound coming off of different speakers, and maybe the phase is altered, and
Right.
you don't hear them. You don't even hear them.
You actually miss out on stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is the notion of phase cancellation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I essentially, if to simplify it as much as possible, +1 meets -1. Is that the easiest way to quickly describe it? As far as
Yes.
the waves, yeah, like one
Yes,
up
I would think so. Yeah, for periodic waves.
for periodic
Yeah.
waves, right?
Yeah.
'Cause now we're dealing with seconds and man-made seconds. I mean, is that even? How do we broach this topic? It's very tough. Even
I've been pondering a lot of it on it.
I'm sure, man.
Yeah.
It's like as hard as defining the word rhythm or the word frequency. It's very hard to define it, and the nature of frequency. We know what frequency is, but these are hard things to define, and it's tough to come to an official decision on. Seriously, like look up rhythm. There's so many definitions for rhythm in any dictionary. I have several music dictionaries. They're all different, long definitions. And not 5 different definitions. It's one long definition for rhythm. It's hard to describe. And I always ask the students, no matter what, and they're always like, I know what it is. And I said, I know you know what it is. This isn't a pass or fail question. I just want to see what you say today. Everyone says something different. What rhythm is. There's so many aspects of rhythm, but again,
they say mostly?
They usually just say it's like they do this. They're like, it's you play and the timing is good. I'm like, all right, that's fine. Time is right. Rhythm moves through time. It's just okay. We're reading, when you read music, you're reading time technically. Yeah. Good. It's interesting, man. It's but what about it being currently based on the man-made second? How do you feel about that? What is there something else to add to that? Can it change, or should we leave it as is? It's okay. Not good or bad. Just curious.
Interesting that I encountered was the Vedic timekeeping, based on the sun and the moon.
Right, cycles.
Yeah. We don't know exactly how fast the sun spins, but we define it relatively. Like,
right,
sunrise, sundown, that's a day. If you really look at it, in summer days are longer and in winter days are shorter. So there's no exactness to the period of a day. So why would there be an exactness to the period of a second?
Right.
And I think that might be the case. That we are also remembers me of my girlfriend just started to learn music. She's a real beginner at it, and she didn't understand the notion of the interval between two notes.
Right.
It's also something generic. It's something relative that happens. There are two notes, and there's this. We call it a distance. We call it.
Right.
But it's something she couldn't place her finger on it, on what it was. Like, to me, that feels like the same. Like, how long is a second?
Right.
It depends on the stance of the sun and the moon.
So, right. Yeah, you don't look up at the sky and say it's 12:47 and 0.28 seconds. You can't do that. But you can judge other factors of time. Perhaps the whole nature of your time is worth this much as a working slave, tax-paying slave. Perhaps that has a lot to do with it. Perhaps they were prepping us for that.
And then, for example, if you go to read the Wikipedia on frequency, The definition there is of a second is something like there's this, I don't know the name of it, but there's this chemical element that has it's a weird number, a very weird number that has a period of change, and that is defined as a second, if I remember correctly. When it goes from one state to the other, this particular chemical element, then that's what we call a second. And I was like, why? And it's like they are doing this on purpose. Like, who can measure this?
Right.
A
Well,
regular person on the street. Okay, who can measure the change of one particular atom in its appearance? Like,
is that
it's
the atomic clock? Is that what that is? Or is that more of the, I don't
I
remember
wouldn't
if that's,
know.
yeah.
I just remember scrolling through the Wikipedia the other day.
Interesting. No, that's worth adding. I mean, really, dude, we're really hitting on a lot of amazing topics here, considering how varied they have been to from just anatomy in general to how the body works in certain ways that are usually a pretty big mystery for people, to all of these different thoughts about the way things are controlling us possibly and other things. But the one of the last points I wanted to bring up is that I remember very particularly when those Korg keyboards started coming out and people were kind of recording on them, making their own music with them, the Korg workstations, and you could quantize your rhythm, which simply means that if you're playing if you're trying to play a certain steady time, if you weren't so steady, you could actually set it up to listen to your recording and equalize it perfectly with the seconds or with the time that you wanted it to be, 16th notes, 8th notes. So you took away
that's how I program music. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, you're, especially the way I heard one or two of the, you were reimagining some other old things, and that it was cool. There's a place for it. Of course, there's a place for it, but I don't think I don't think the place for it is in a rock band or a jazz band or anything like that. Or a classical symphony, where you can quantize the rhythm or you can pitch correct the music, the singer, let's say, But that's it. People would always say, "Oh, well, that's what everyone does. You got to do that." That is not what everyone does at all. It's just what some people do, the popular people that have all the big money and reach billions of people and make, maybe make some money, as long as they play ball, of course. It's false to say the least, and I wonder if it's just like a false reality on top of a false reality. Everyone seems to be quite aware that the music industry has been pushing some pretty evil stuff for a while, in the same level of Hollywood, let's say. But there's also this level to it where you might, even if each person that recorded the album is a human, they may be robotically controlled, mechanically manipulated afterwards, digitally destroyed, I should say, and quantized and pitch corrected. And does this lead to, in finality here, does this lead to how people watch the news? That's a construct too. You don't know that the people that are talking to you are standing where they're standing. You don't see behind the camera. When people are clapping and stuff, you don't even know if there's anyone there. And I wonder how much of an overlap there is here with our perceived reality of what we hear and our perceived reality of what we see. It's so easy to manipulate all of these things. And I can only hope that more and more people believe this to be true, because it's not that it's a guess or I mean, it's pretty well known that this is fact. This is the way things work. We're dealing with studios that produce images and sounds for people. And I just wonder, what do you think? Do you think I know that was a big loaded thing, but
yeah. You ended there with the exception of fiction that is fact.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the ITPRA theory of David Huron, where you have this impulse and then you have a reaction to it. First the tension builds up, then you have a reaction to it, and then you have the appraisal. And I think if we are quantizing everything, our prediction responses are very satisfying. You can easily predict the future, something which we humans cannot do normally. But if we are keeping time exactly, we can. So we are we are made to feel good by this music. We are made to feel we are brought out of center. We are focused on the future, and we are predicting the future, and we are succeeding in predicting the future. So it feels good. It's just like that's the first thing that comes to mind, and then the second thing is the quadrivium again. You have the math, the geometry, the music, and the astrology. Somehow I feel it's keeping everyone in just the math or the geometry thing away from music and away from astrology. If you just quantify everything, then you are not asking the questions, what's the sequence?
Right.
That's exactly what we should ask in the quadrivium. If we mention music, if we study music, we should ask the question, what's the sequence? And try to find contradictions in there. But people don't do that, especially people that are not musically trained, especially people that are simply relying on somebody else that produced a beat that is very predictable. They're
Right.
not asking questions. So they are just kept in this, I wouldn't say low level way of thinking, but they're not thinking for themselves. They're only asking the question, how much? They're only asking the mathematical side of it. They're not asking. Some are asking, what's the form?
Right.
But so all this quantizing that is going on, yeah, it's the same reality, but you don't look at it through the entire quadrivium. You just use the first two parts of it, and you keep away from everything that is rhythmic and because that's already done for you. Like you're being catered with it, and you don't have to be putting the effort in there to think for yourself and to really check if it's true or not.
Well said. Really, I think these are words to live by, man, and things to look into if you're unfamiliar with the quadrivium and the trivium. But I would say a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, where you work the exact hours that your kids go to school, that is as quantized of a rhythm as possible. That is not how life is supposed to work at all. And the sun and the moon prove it by having different periods over different parts of the year and their cycles. So, just if there was anything to leave this with after all that we've said, we really talked about a lot here, is that, fight the quantization, avoid it. Rhythm is supposed to be elastic. And, mistakes musically are supposed to be beautiful and taken to heart and placed into the recording.
The joke there is when I'm programming music and I'm really quantizing it.
Yeah.
They now added a humanized knob.
Oh yeah.
So it's not quite on tempo. It's not
right. Oh my God. That's I didn't know that actually. I didn't hear that. That's
many of the software synthesizers have a humanized knob.
It's amazing.
So you can humanize it a little.
Oh, that'll give me something to think about for sure. Really. It's well, I don't know if we could add to this. This has really been a very well-rounded and stimulating conversation for anyone that heard this. I hope that they got as much out of it as I did. I learned a lot today. And after writing all these questions out, I didn't even know, where this path would take us. But I can't possibly thank you enough for making the time. I think it's been awesome to, again, we're kind of revealing you to people that are already familiar with your name and see all the very interesting things that you have to say, during the shows that me and a few other people have. It's wonderful. And I really appreciate it.
It's a great experience for me too. Like past 2 years, I've been reading books. I've been going over podcasts. I think I must have seen like 1,000 podcasts or something.
Yeah.
In 2 years' time. So I gathered all this data in the grammar stage. I've been pondering so much on it, and I now feel ready to share some of it. I feel I've gathered enough knowledge. It's been enough. It's like, don't give me a new mystery school to look at anymore.
I know, I know.
I now want to share this knowledge, and yeah, it's a great way of doing this. I'm very grateful that I could be doing this with you here.
Of course. Of course. I consider you a friend, and this has been really wonderful for me. And there is always that idea of taking a lot in. And of course, you want to do that to gain and to grow and to make up for lost time, not bothering studying anything for years because you're a quantized labor slave. But now it is good to let that aside for a bit and maybe not read 5 books in a month and just relax and let it all digest. Because like I tell a lot of my students, if you cram for a song the night before, you need a few nights of sleep for the muscle memory to really settle. You can't just, most people can't just do that. So there's always much to know and much to learn. And I can't thank you enough. I think it's been really awesome. And this is not the last time we will have you on this show. That's for sure.
I hope so. I was about to say it. I hope I can return.
Of course, of course. I'm sure we'll come up with a really cool topic and we'll just run with it, And of course, we'll see you on the Telegram chat and all that other stuff. It's been great. And I look forward to the next one.
Me too.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.